Let's give Jack a round of applause. That was actually super educational for me. You know, I work here and I did not actually know our exit route. So thank you. I will try to remember all of that. Thank you everyone for coming and being here on a lovely, what is this, Wednesday evening, kind of hump day. We've been through most of the week and now we get to, you know, share some leadership tips and talk about some of the leadership stuff. Very, very excited to host you all here at Trainline. We have a very exciting agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to try not to talk too much and kind of just make this more of a discussion. Then we have a little bit of kind of structured sort of socializing time. And then we have an amazing panel, the worst part of which is I'm also on it, but we have 3 other amazing panelists. So that should hopefully be very, very exciting. I'm going to open a little bit by talking about embracing change as a culture. This is the talk I have given previously at CTO Craft and maybe Women on Silicon Roundabout or some conferences like that. It was in a longer time slot, so I have quite a lot of material, and generally I'm the person that likes to talk and can talk at length. So I'm going to try really hard to restrain myself here and not talk too much. With a group of senior leaders like this, I think it's more fun if we make it a conversation. I'm stating a lot of things as a kind of strong opinion. See that more as a conversation opener. I love a challenge, so kind of a lot of things that I will put out there will sound like, you know, are my deepest personal values or something that I kind of like really, really strongly believe. But like anything in leadership, it's never black and white. So kind of consider all of these as a conversation starter. And then I'm definitely looking forward to having a bit of conversation here kind of in the room and then maybe more over drinks later or really on any future occasion. So with that, do any of these ring a bell for you? If there is anyone who didn't raise a hand, where have you been for the last 5 years? I mean, do you really work in tech if you haven't known all of this? So yeah, anyway, the words that have really done a lot of rounds and have made a lot of noise over the last couple of years, you know, the way things changed with COVID-19 and we went to work from home. A couple of years later, kind of we went to you know, started talking about return to the office. Soon after that, we kind of started looking down the economic downturn, which, unlike a couple of previous ones, sort of ended up affecting tech more than I think we've seen in the past or in the last 20 years. And possibly for the first time in a very, very significant way, we were seeing whole swaths of tech industry move from really only optimizing for growth and users to actually thinking about profitability. Imagine that. Is that crazy? And then also, you know, doing rounds of tech layoffs, even in the biggest and most profitable tech companies and so on. Kind of throughout that entire time, we also moved from this area of talking about tech talent wars and tech talent shortage and how there are never enough engineers to, for the first time, talking about, you know, like laying off thousands and hundreds of thousands of engineers, even from, again, biggest and most successful tech companies. And then more recently, in the last 18 months, I guess, if I'm doing my math correctly, talking about how LLMs are completely going to obsolete engineers. And, you know, kind of this is just kind of that entire, you know, the armies of engineers we're all now running are not going to be you know, not going to be a thing anymore. So you may like or not like some of these. You may, you know, disagree with return to the office, or we kind of like various different times here. I'm not saying any of these to scare you. I'm just kind of trying to make a point that in the last 5 years, we had a lot of change in our industry, and I kind of don't think it's going to go away. I think this is sort of how it's going to be now. For most tech companies, the biggest operating expense is the headcount. It's the sort of cost of people, you know, writing code for us. And because of that, especially given that we're not in this lovely, dreamy bubble anymore, where, you know, kind of the industry is forever going to grow, and, you know, kind of eventually you figure out a way how to monetize and all that, I think we'll have to be ready to think a lot about efficiency and are we getting the most out of our teams, and are our teams too big or too small, or are they the right size, and how all that looks. And I suspect we'll continue to go through cycles of, you know, boom and bust, and like kind of hiring engineers, and then actually having to lay them off and kind of all that. So some of these things that I've been seeing in the last couple of years have been a lot of change, and I believe that's here to stay. So how does that sound? Good? Awful? Scary?
True.
True?
Yeah.
Rings a bell? Thanks. I agree. So kind of what's sort of the so what of that? My kind of hypothesis that so what of this is that I think we must build our technical organizations, our engineering organizations, anticipating that entire change in external circumstances. I don't think we get to just ride the happy waves of like, oh gosh, this is a massive growth opportunity and we're just going to go higher and go after it. I think we also have to be ready that there might be something else kind of on the other end of that. And that there could be other things that we never thought about, like the global pandemic and having to change the work environments or having to have, getting LLMs to take away jobs from our people. Kind of like, I think it could be a lot of things we can imagine and a lot of things we can't even imagine that'll happen. And I think we just have to be ready to lead in an environment where kind of that's going to be the case. And then as leaders, if we build our organizations anticipating change every year or 2 or 5, I think it's also really important that as individuals, as human beings, to understand that some of the resilient choices that organizations make are done for certain reasons, and we need to learn how to live and accept them and work with them and frankly use them to our benefit. Does that make sense? So what? Anything else of the so what of a lot of change?
Do you think that there's space in the so what, so building our organisations underpinned by very strong, clear vision, values of an organisation, because that also lends itself to the resilience and that decision making as well?
This is not a planted question, I swear, but thank you for tallying up some of my content. Thank you. Yes, this is exactly what it is. It's like that's precisely what I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. And again, like it's super fascinating topic, a lot more we could talk about. But yes, short answer is yes, I do, and kind of we'll talk more about it in a second. One other thing I wanted to say here is, I think people often talk about importance of, like, people often talk about leading through change as something where you obviously need to show a lot of empathy, you need to communicate well, you need to bring your people on a journey, you need to take your leadership teams on a journey first, and then kind of the rest of the organization. There are a lot of steps around navigating organizational change, and I think a lot of that has been the case for very many years, that, professional industries have existed, and a little bit less the case in technology, but still to a certain degree in technology. And I think that topic is well explored. The other topic that I think is well explored is kind of our own individual resilience and what can we do to not feel lost when things like this happen, when your company is laying off people, when you are under risk of redundancy, all of these things are happening. There is a lot of talk around how you can ground yourself and stay calm and stay not necessarily thrive, but at least survive through periods like that. What I think people don't talk enough about is what to do on the other side of that. If you're a leader, how you can build your organizations that kind of allow you to. So that's why I'm not saying that the other two are not important. They're extremely important. I think they're just a little bit more explored as a topic. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk more about what I think as leaders we can do to be ready for inevitable change.
How do you avoid organisations standing still? Because if you look at COVID,
yeah,
I mean, some people would have predicted that, but not many, right? And so how do you, when you're trying to anticipate those external circumstance changes, some things you're never going to predict. So how do you prevent organisations standing still and going, well, what if we have another COVID? So we don't want to make a decision. I mean, do you talk about that? Or do you have a view on that?
I think my approach is a little bit more meta, in the sense that without trying to predict what the change would be, which I completely agree with you is almost impossible. Like, I mean, who would have guessed about COVID? Who would have even guessed about, again, like kind of LLMs taking engineers' jobs, which I'm not claiming is actually happening, but that is the meme a little bit. That's the myth. That's the kind of, hey, some people genuinely believe that will totally be the case a couple of years down the line. And they may or may not be right. I'm not taking the judgment call. But a lot of these things are very difficult to predict. I wouldn't. I'm not a betting person, so I personally wouldn't kind of try to predict. I would just kind of try to suggest, and I think that's what I'm going to talk about, suggest ways in which I think you build an organization that's kind of more ready to withstand any change, no matter what it is. And again, these are my hypotheses. You know, I will state them with a lot of conviction, but you're free to disagree or kind of even better to add your own. And kind of, I'm hoping kind of all together we can find ways to build our organizations in a more resilient way. Right, so with that, because all good things come, sorry, was that a question?
No,
It's
no,
like
no,
this
it's
just,
fine. I'll be able to speak to you later, but yeah, no, I was resonating what you're saying. Like, it's more worry about it when it happens, but make good risk decisions. Is that kind of what you're saying? So, I mean, risk averse, be risk aware.
I think, yes.
A good risk decision.
Exactly, exactly. And this could be the thing that, you know, it's kind of, we can get into a lot of detail, but, you know, sometimes in many industries that are, where risk is very well understood, like security or
Right.
reliability or many others, anything money related, really, finance, sometimes you make the decision which is not necessarily the most cost efficient, but it's more risk aware and it's more flexible in terms of risk.
Detecting the risk.
It's more desk, yeah.
Understanding how you're going to react to it as opposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, kind of you buy insurance even though you don't have to spend that money because you're anticipating that if something bad happens,
Failure. You
expect that potentially it's worth it a little bit
It's
extra.
when.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Please.
Thank you. So, awareness, definitely 100% subscribe to what the gentleman just said. But then there's the capability. And that has to be, you have to already have that, you already have to build that. And there's multiple ways of doing it from, you know, Kotter and Maslow and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I bang on quite a lot about a formula for change, which is around vision, skills, incentive, and something else I can't remember because I'm nervous speaking like this. But that makes change.
Yep.
But if any of that's it's vision. No, it's a plan. That's it.
Direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Direction, yeah.
So
Plan.
all of those make up the formula, which if anybody wants to take it offline and go to Kotter,
Yeah.
he's put that together. But if you've got the infrastructure to be able to deal with it, then what the gentleman said already, you've anticipated it, and then you've got the infrastructure to deal with it, so you can just wheel it out, inverted commas. Or in fact, you can just have it going on all the time in the background, because if it's, as you say, change is always happening.
It's always happening. And is this, when you talk about this, do you mean how, like, getting the teams ready for change, or getting or getting systems ready, technical systems, technical,
Of the business.
all the assets of the business in a way. That's just like that. So, yeah, yeah. I believe I'm actually aware of the formula. I think I read this in a while, but I should brush up on it. Like, I haven't seen it in a while. Right. So because all good things come in threes, I have summarized this. I have actually kind of wedged into this into three ways. It's probably more like 7 or something, but, you know, I have kind of tried to summarize them into 3 because no one would remember 7. And I'm asking you to remember because there will be a quiz in the end. No, there won't be a quiz in the end, but, you know, it's just right. So with that, yeah, I need to keep myself on time. So I think we're kind of doing okay. I think we're kind of, if I do another 10 minutes of talking and then we do another 15 minutes of discussion, I think that roughly lands us in the right place. So the first one I'm going to put out here with, again, a lot of conviction and belief, and I genuinely do believe this one is, in the tech industries, I think we very often go into specializing. You know, it's kind of someone chooses to be the cloud native DevOps security specialist, or someone is, you know, just kind of, I don't know, the JavaScript, you know, this specific framework kind of person, or something. Kind of, I think because there are these keywords, and yes, there are specialities, I think people over-index on it. And, you know, I have dealt with a lot of problems that stem from this, like largely fungibility. You have a very large team, and yet actually, when you look to redeploy people, you can't do anything because everyone is kind of of the wrong skill set and all that. And I think issues like this are particularly painful when you're going through change, because when you're going through change, that's exactly what you usually have to do. Like, priorities have changed, your roadmap has changed, you now need to build something different. You're not building mobile app anymore, you're going back to web, or you're building APIs and building kind of external services or whatever else. I found that the more generalist engineers you hire, the ones who, you know, identify as software engineers and are willing to pick up kind of any language. And I appreciate that's a very high bar and ambitious sometimes to hire people who can just universally, effectively contribute through on any part of the stack. But I think kind of trying to to do as much of that as possible, like getting someone who's T-shaped and can do at least 2 technologies rather than 1, or someone who's willing to kind of try different parts, someone who's a front-end engineer rather than, Android engineer or kind of any of it. I think, again, like as a leader, hiring generalists as much as possible or T-shaped people as much as possible, and then continuing to invest in their growth. And by that, I don't mean just further specializing and building expertise in their specific area, but actually broadening out is one of the most forward-looking, responsible things you can do kind of for the company, because I think just when those inevitable change times happen, it gives you more space, it gives you more flexibility to move people around, to redeploy them, to kind of make changes with any of that. And I think often it's referred to kind of hiring people, not technologies, hiring people who are willing to accept that mindset and willing to work with it, and kind of all that. Please, yeah.
When you use the term generalists, to use a not so good term, but the shit hits the fan, you always go to the specialist who understands it. It's probably the guy who built it.
Yeah.
And he or she is the only one who can fix it.
Yeah.
So where's the logic in just hiring generalists, or is there a balance?
Probably a balance. Good point. I think it's kind of, well, personally, I have an issue with that kind of, there is this one person who built it, they're the only ones who can fix it, pass factor of 1, what happens if, it's kind of that entire story. So I don't think it's healthy. I think sometimes forcing yourself to go through a little bit of pain just so something is built in a way that more people can contribute and understand and all of that is kind of like, that's one thing. Nevertheless, obviously, all of us end up with parts that are like that, with parts of team, parts kind of all that. I think there is still a difference where, sure, you will probably, if you're like app-centric business, you will still need an iOS expert and an Android expert, someone who's whatever, like a principal engineer and teaches everyone else what is the best-in-class Android and/or iOS and/or whatever, pick your technology of choice. But equally, you will need a team and an army of those same, of a certain skill set contributing. So I think, like, keeping some specialists and then as much as possible kind of getting generalists who can do more broader things would probably be where I would go with if possible.
I think maybe to extend a little bit on what you were saying there, and to your point, I think generalist is sometimes confused to mean someone who's not skilled. They know lots of things but no depth. Whereas my experience of working with teams is that you can have generalists who happen to have quite in-depth skill in their particular field.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a problem so much, but sometimes you do find that you have really niche skills that a team of generalists just don't know.
Yeah.
COBOL, for example. Right? So,
fair enough. Fun.
Let's say that's a kind of niche.
Feel some trauma happening there, but I'm here to hear. I'm listening.
Well, you could make a decision to do a build versus buy.
Yeah,
And
that's
say,
fair.
I'm going to get an external partner to
Yeah.
bring in those very niche skills
Yeah.
to extend and enhance.
I like that. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Completely, yeah. Agree.
So it's also like really depends on the size of the organization and maturity, because I spent many years in fund, like Microsoft, Facebook, and these companies hire only generalists.
Yeah.
Right. So there is no any single like interview based on what technology you know. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter because you came there, you learn.
Yeah.
And this is great, right? So you teach your generalists to become specialists, right?
Yeah.
And perfectly fine. But now I switch kind of to a small startup scale up, where this is not the case, right? It's really hard to get people and spend time teaching them, training them, and wait until they will start to get
I literally had the same journey joining from Google, where that's the same story. You hire generalists, and again joining this, and I was like, oh my god, I have a massive team. What do all these people do? And when you actually slice it up by web, Android, iOS, .NET, Ruby, and a few other skill sets, I'm like, oh, actually, no, in each one of these, I don't have enough people. It's kind of like, it just ends up being this ridiculous problem that it just doesn't quite feel efficient. And again, there is truth to both, but yeah, I empathize with that. I think we had here, and then we'll go.
That's okay. I was just going to resonate on what you're saying. So more aptitude to learn, be adaptive. I think that's what you're saying, really, rather than knowledge. I mean, no one knows everything, right? And even experts, how do you measure expert, right? So it's actually nice to challenge experts sometimes, to keep them experts.
Yeah.
So having a blend, to your point, was probably the piece that I would say, but it's a cultural thing,
For sure.
It's a culture.
Yeah, it's really funny. The thing that works against us as leaders, I guess, or just kind of it's a little bit awkward here, is that very often people choose to over-specialize just because then they're easier to find on LinkedIn.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
it's kind of like, you know, they stick all the keywords, and then it's kind of, and when someone is looking for someone in cloud, DevOps, security, or whatever, they are kind of the person. They're like their 100% match, even though that doesn't actually mean they're better in cloud DevOps security rather than someone who describes themselves as infrastructure engineer or whatever. That's like, so I think there is that like kind of the keyword, LinkedIn keyword matching or
but
whatever.
It's like a conscious bias to go to the expert.
This
to
is
your
like,
point.
that's,
So
yeah,
like,
it's kind of,
yeah,
you
that's
kind
a
of
difficult.
determine, yeah. I mean, there's so many funny stories. Like there is a contact of mine, someone I've worked with previously, who is now on LinkedIn as AI, ML consultant specialist. And I swear, 18 months ago, he was a crypto Web3 AI, so a crypto Web3 specialist. It's kind of like just picking whatever is the hype of the moment and just kind of like that is somehow their expertise, just because obviously it's kind of easiest to sell. I'm enjoying the conversation as we go. Sorry, I promised you. Let's do yours. Yeah.
I think in this context, it might be helpful to distinguish between responding to a crisis and responding to change.
Yeah.
I think to the original point, specialists are what you need when you've got a crisis and the thing that you've got is broken and you need people to fix it. But specialists can become wedded to what they know and what's already worked in the past, and the conditions of change may not be conducive to leading you forward, and that's where you need people that are more flexible. So I think there was also the point about adaptability. There's nothing to say. You know, a generalist can become a specialist with the right support, and then they can be adaptable if they have the right mindset to let go and move on.
Well, completely agree with that, all that. Yeah, awesome, good stuff. A lot of I love how you're writing my next talk on this topic, guys. Like, it's just like really enriching it. That's good.
Have you got another moment, or are you?
Yeah, I think let's go through the two more. And then maybe we'll leave all the rest of the time then in the end for discussion. Just kind of, that's just because it's really important to go through all of my slides, guys. This is proper. No, these are the scrappiest, the worst slides, because I was certain I have this deck, but then I realized I actually have deck for way longer time. So I was, 15 minutes before just putting some slides together, just so I remind myself what I want to talk about. Right. The second one is something that was teed up earlier. I swear, I owe you a drink, even though, I haven't planted it. I think there is no better way of being ready for change than trying to, I don't want this to sound duplicitous, but kind of like, I want to say, trying to be perceived as purpose-driven business. Obviously, you would actually be a purpose-driven business. That would be the idea. But I think if employees have that sense of loyalty to the purpose, even when the times get tough, they're more likely to stick around, right? It's kind of like, and again, like, I'm very careful how I communicate this because it can sound like manipulative almost, like you're kind of misrepresenting, your business in order to improve retention. And that's not quite what I'm saying. I'm saying like, ideally, yes, all the businesses should be purpose-driven and mission-driven and we should all align to something we believe in as we come to work to make our paycheck. But I do think it's silly not to acknowledge it. Like, I do think that kind of like, I've heard lots of times, kind of very, very smart people who have so much choice in where they get a job, choose the job that might not be the highest pay, that might not have the highest title, but they say things like, the reason I joined this company is because I really believe in their purpose. It's kind of, I really believe in what they're trying to accomplish and I want to be part of this. It makes me warm and fuzzy and makes me feel good and kind of all that. And again, when something not so good happens, when that company has to do layoffs or change a strategy or do different things, people are more likely to put up with that kind of stuff as opposed to it's just somewhere where they, they're showing up for a paycheck. And then the second thing, and I think this is probably going to be controversial, is I think along the similar vein, I think it's important to invest in building bonds among employees because when, and I don't want to say things like, oh, work is like family and kind of all that. I think all of that has, gotten a lot of negative publicity over the last year or two, and for good reasons and kind of all that. But there is something around having that camaraderie and sense of community and belonging in the office where you're in kind of with the people that you work with, that's likely to make you more likely to stick around if things are not really good. I definitely had cases where I was just a little bit disillusioned with what the company is trying to do or this particular strategy of what my team or bosses are kind of putting forward. But I had such a good kind of group of people I was working with. I loved rocking up every day and solving hard problems with them, or kind of going for beers after work. And it just felt so strong that through some of those downturn periods, it made me not still want to stick around and kind of want to stay and work with them and kind of all that. And I think just as a vehicle, kind of as a tool we have as leaders, I think both of these are really important. Just kind of making the environment purpose-driven and investing in kind of building bonds kind of among people in the team. Yes, there and then there.
Maybe just a comment. I'm talking a lot with like a person who's like a senior executive coach, coaching actually senior people on Google, and she's saying like about the current situation in Google that one big mistake that Google done is give people purpose in life by the mission. Right? And this is the big problem. It makes the environment.
Everyone's like you said, you won't be evil, and now you're evil. That kind of stuff.
Like,
Yeah.
How you can let go of your family, right?
Yeah.
People became family and you not let them go.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful with this.
For sure. It's the one with potion that can go wrong. I guess like it's kind of that's the. But equally, like I think it just if you're just treating it as a way, you're just clock in and you show up and kind of all that. It's like, and that's specifically why I'm kind of like. That's why I struggle to believe in fully remote workplace and like things like that. And I know that's controversial opinion, and I'm sure some of you will be fully supportive of kind of environments like that. But I feel as a leader I couldn't deploy all my weapons in making team the most resilient, the most kind of successful that it can be, and so on. Please.
I mean, the NHS has a clear purpose: keeping people healthy, safety.
Doesn't get any better than that. Fair enough. Yeah.
All your money. In the commercial world, what is your example of an exemplary purpose-driven organization, and why?
Well, this is also not a planted question, but thank you for asking. Here at Trainline. This is exactly. This is my boss is listening from behind the curtain, so I have to do this. No, he's not actually. I guess it's at Trainline we are purpose-driven. We kind of look to reduce CO2 emissions by increasing modal shift from cars and airplanes into trains. So that's why and whereas you could form the entire thing completely differently and say that we just try to sell the most train tickets we can so we can make the most commission. That's not the thing that fires people up and gets them from bed in the morning. It's kind of the thing that gets people excited is thinking like, oh my goodness, like in my 9 to 5, I have helped a little bit reduce CO2 emissions because, kind of I'm convinced 3 extra people to move from car or airplane. So that would be one example. I'm sure there are many others, it's kind of even in fintech, which I sometimes struggle with, like I think they very often frame it around democratization of access to investing, or that's Robinhood specifically. that's their purpose, and a few other ones. Like I think it's very often it ends up being about framing and how you think about it and what you kind of choose to believe. Yeah, please.
So you talked about purpose, which I completely agree with, but I also think it ties back to the topic of this talk as well, is culture.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I've had experience working in a startup that then got bought by a big corporate, and I've worked anywhere in between. And during the hard times, especially during COVID, it wasn't just the purpose of the organization that kept us all together. It was the culture, the environment of my boss, me managing my team, being able to keep those communication lines open, which I thought kept us much closer together. Moving into, say, like one of the large rigid structures, which completely then broke down
the fabric of the I understand. That resonates. I understand. Agreed. Cool. Okay, let's move to the third one, and then kind of running out of time. This third one is particularly difficult to explain in not in a lot of time, but I think it's critical. If you're going to build a resilient organization, it's so critical to minimize the silos and organizational silos, and especially to minimize this kind of this sense where leaders in the organization create their own little fiefdoms that they think are kind of their own thing, and think where they worry a lot about territorialism, about empire building, about kind of all that. And so many organizations get this wrong. I personally think this is one of the hardest things to get right, and it's the thing that particularly trips you up at the times of change, because at the times of change, when you have to make those changes, when you have to kind of all that, that's when silos will be, that's when they're more in the way than ever. They're always in the way. They always make organizations less efficient, less effective. But particularly when you're at the times of change, I think it can be pretty brutal. For example, I've seen this a lot where companies kind of assign titles and levels and salaries and kind of all that based on the size of the team someone is running. So then if you're a manager of that team, what's your incentive? Of course, just to grow your team at all costs. And I really worry how much of that has happened within tech. I really feel so many of the, so many of the companies with armies of engineers, with hundreds of thousands of, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of engineers. When you look at what they're building, you're actually a bit like, really? I think that should be kind of maybe 22 people tops. This is kind of I really don't get it. But it's very easy for a manager to say, you know what? I cannot. In order to build this extra thing you're asking me, I need extra people, and then I need extra people, and I need extra people. And that's how your lieutenants become generals, and your kind of whatever, kind of in that entire thing. And unless company disincentivizes that kind of behavior, very quickly you bubble up and balloon, and then obviously at some stage that's kind of, especially if the whatever economic conditions change or the funding dries up or all that. That's when you will have to cut, and then when you're going to be super brutal and kind of all that. So kind of the third area is kind of anything that can be done around that kind of culture where leaders are not incentivized just to keep hiring. Leaders are incentivized to keep their teams as small and as efficient as possible. And anything where kind of by being territorial, sort of basically saying, oh no, we need more headcount, not that team. We're doing harder work, we're doing better stuff, not that other team. That's kind of where people put their own teams, the goals ahead of company goals. I think that's ultimately the thing that just kind of massively gets in the way of change and handling change and kind of really anything good culturally like that. Lex, please.
One of the things that kind of comes to mind in this is not just the teams you build, but the teams that you bring in. So consultancies, for example. And it's not uncommon that at consultancies, to grow in the consultancy, you're supposed to take on bigger accounts or more complex things, or that once you've reached certain levels, people are disincentivized to challenge. And as the consumer of those consulting agreements, you're effectively at the whim of their unfortunate territorialism and fiefdoms. How do you guard against that in kind of thinking about it if you do take on consultancies?
How many people? Do you want to try to take a stab at the answer?
I've got an opinion on that one.
Yeah,
so,
there we go.
I work for a consultancy.
The reason, there we go. Yeah. By the way, the reason I paused answering, I was like, need to make sure I don't insult anyone who works at consultancies.
And I see that all the time. I've worked in a couple of different consultancies, and you see that sort of fiefdom. I think part of selecting a really good consultancy is one that asks you questions about how they can integrate into your organisation's culture. So how can my team deliver it in a way that they don't feel like they're my team? So they go into your organisation and they do a great job, and you don't actually think of them as, I work for Global Logic, therefore it's Global Logic's team. So I think that's the way to go about it, asking questions of the supplier around how do you make your team appear invisible on the client side?
There is a balance. What's the saying? Something about you don't get sacked for hiring IBM. But for me, primarily it's the characteristics of the people that are actually doing the RFP on their side. And then taking a look at the people that are actually going to be involved in supporting your project or program. That's really where it comes down to. If you can't relate to them, you pretty much guarantee something like that's happening. Flip side of that is that you've got to find the right people. So.
Please. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Do and then you after.
Okay, cool. So I actually back to the inter-team interactions. I've actually seen both of these, and we've tried, for example, to actively recognize when teams work together and call that out as a good behavior.
Amazing,
So I
yeah.
wonder if you have any other tips or things that you've seen work to shift this mentality.
Yeah, oh God, this is where another hour of the chat comes in. This is one of my favorite topics, really. Like, so if anyone wants to talk about it, I'll probably be offered. I think org structure and goaling is that really ends up mattering around it. Like setting up your team so that accountability is clear and they are kind of, their goals are clear to the point where the entire ROI of the team can be calculated as much as possible. And I know that that's not always easy, but as much as is possible, kind of, it becomes easy to trade this sort of thing of like, wait, this is what you want to bring in, but really you're asking 10 people, the value you're bringing in is actually not worth 10 people worth of salary. Or, it's kind of like something like that. I found that kind of alignment of org structure with the goals, kind of as much as possible, actual business relevant goals, even if it's technical stuff like productivity or like engineering productivity endeavors or reliability or all of that. Like ultimately, most of those can be translated into business goals, money often in most cases, and aligning the org structure and goals so that kind of your leaders are then kept accountable for end-to-end, both the P and L side of kind of that story. But obviously, yeah, happy to talk more about it. Like a lot of it is also just culture, as you say, just recognizing the right things and saying it's kind of all that. We had a gentleman behind and then we'll come back to you.
Thanks. So I also work in consultancy, but I also have bought services from consultancies as well. So I live on both sides of the fence. My advice to anybody who's trying to protect against consultancies landing and spending too much, breaking team structures as a result, is when you go for procurement, don't let the procurement team run the procurement process. Let them run the logistics, let them organise the meetings, but get your technologists to meet their technologists. And check cultural alignment and check the fit of personalities of your intended team that are going to land with you to make sure they're the right characters.
Yeah.
And when we were buying in services, pretty largely at one organisation, we actually did modelling of a sprint in a day. We got people in the room, we went through a series of planning, training challenges. How would you react to this? Who would you talk to? How would you work with us to actually solve these things? And we awarded it to the people that actually had the most evidence.
Nice.
And because when you buy in services, you're buying people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you are buying skills, but you're buying people, and you just want to make sure you get the right people with the right ethical fit, and that really evaluates your interaction, not through paper-based RFP responses and so on.
Thank you. Super helpful. Please.
Yeah, it's just on the same lines as the previous point around performance management and like bringing HR on the journey, like because it seems like we've gone through lots of transformations and we changed the process and the structures of how people are organised, and kind of the thing that's forgotten is actually that we still performance manage people in an individualistic way.
Yeah.
And actually, how do you create structures that encourages people to act as teams, and therefore the performance management is about teams rather than individuals.
Oh, interesting. It's a good point. It's like, isn't performance of the team, including like effectiveness of how well team works together, responsibility of the manager of that team? So in a way, like managing performance of a manager of the team allows you to maybe push that through. Although, to be honest, I'm kind of saying this and half don't believe my own answer, because it's very hard. Like, if you're only solving things at the time of performance management, it's kind of already late. Like, you're already, especially if it's a manager, you already are probably dealing with a year worth of ineffective work, team that's probably unhappy, people who are resigning, kind of like all that bad stuff.
And we're trying to encourage empowered, like self-managing teams.
Yeah.
So actually they should be able to
resolve and solve
and work
things
together rather than be managed.
Yeah, that would be the dream. Does it happen often? Like, it's kind of, just like sort of, it's kind of like, that's, I still kind of think that managers have a job and they need to manage, and doesn't mean micromanage, but just kind of, but part of that is precisely managing people happiness on the team, their satisfaction, obviously their development and growth, and then execution, and kind of like aligning teams to their goals and make sure that they're moving those goals and kind of all that. That's but good topic. Maybe one more question and then we move on. Please, yeah.
So if change is constant and you're building your teams to be resilient, is change management necessary?
Well, if we were successful at like properly designing, organizations to be fully change ready, then yeah, change management wouldn't, it would be. Oh, I've heard this quote sometimes. Someone said like, through actually a fairly serious round of layoffs, said something like, "Oh, we just need to normalize this so it becomes like trimming your fingernails rather than removing an organ." And I was shocked. I was like, good God, this is like such a brutal thing to say as a kind of, but I think there is something around people, like everyone being ready, that change is always coming, and that's normal, and not seeing it as a huge threat, seeing it as an opportunity, and kind of, a lot of things play out there. I think to specifically answer your question, I don't think I've ever fully kind of completely built an organization in a way where I could claim, now I think we're change ready. So kind of, yeah, like I haven't gotten there yet, but if I do, we'll see. Maybe no need for change management. Yeah.
So there's a change around spinning plates and the orchestration of the process. You can't just have change, push it and say, the way you go, guys, start changing. It doesn't happen like that at all. At the end of the day, you've got so many different things that you need to bring into the mix, and you need to apply it as and when it comes about. In other words, spinning a plate,
yeah,
which needs spinning.
Yeah, I think there is like the judgment of what a change should be. Someone obviously needs to make that call always, and then there is the kind of the mechanics, the operations of executing, from everything from writing comms emails to making people reporting line changes to whatever, kind of like doing consultations in redundancy rounds. It's kind of like, doing all of those mechanics. I think it's more like, I guess maybe the dream state is just making them no drama, making them like clipping the fingernails and just, yes, there is some mechanics and there's obviously decision that needs to be made, but it's kind of no drama, and everyone is sort of a bit grown up about it and being like, okay, this is a change, kind of, it's like happy days. Yeah, let's do this one, and then I think we really need to wrap up.
Just about your thoughts on who's going to pick up the bill. Because obviously, like, we are not charities, we're all companies. I'm sorry for sounding a little bit like better here, but the insurance has cost associated with it.
Yeah.
How do you justify that in your P&L?
Right, good question. So I guess you're implying that these three things would be like insurance and that they come at a cost, which may or may not be the case, right? Like, it's kind of like, I would argue that hiring generalists is not going to necessarily be more expensive for you, or like getting good degree of your people on the team to be generalists is not necessarily going to be more expensive. That's the kind of the, so kind of, I think maybe what I'm trying to say is that, like, with the kind of the proposals that I've put out here for discussion, kind of, I think it's more about, I think these are cost-efficient ways to get ready for change. There are probably other more expensive ways to do it, like insurance equivalent, like where you pay a premium to kind of to do it. I haven't thought about those. I was never allowed luxury to think about,
Maybe just to flip that though, what's the cost of not doing and taking care of these things? Because we've all probably been in workspaces where the culture is toxic, the leadership know it, they're not really addressing the core root of the issue. And then what does that mean for the workforce? What does that mean for productivity?
It's a missed opportunity cost as well.
Missed opportunity cost.
Like toxic culture is completely what I was alluding to, and I was thinking why, I can justify why I think it's more investment. If you hire a generalist, regardless of toxic culture or not, which strive not to have,
of course,
you have to invest. Because on your page, you have to invest in them. So they will be productive. They cannot hit the ground running.
Fair.
That has cost. You have to, on the second point, also have to invest into building this relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's money.
True.
Right? Yes, people will stay longer, but like in cutthroat, low-margin business, where people want to move from one position to another every 2 years, can you afford this investment?
Yeah.
It's not always a junior person, right? No, it doesn't mean you don't need to invest in that person.
I do think actually you have a point. It's kind of like, again, when I joined Trainline, like a lot of people were saying things like, my directors were saying things like, we can't hire juniors, we're too busy for it. And I was like, what? That's ridiculous. Like, it's kind of, I just gonna, like, I think it will probably be different for different industries or types of businesses. I think cultural part of it is very important as well. It's there is also something where like it might work different for something that's startup and may run out of money very soon, as opposed to something that's a very established business with, I don't know, like existing user base that's safe, or contracts that know that they'll be safe 3 years down the line. And the efficiency math looks different for all of those, for different timelines. When you take retention into account, when you take kind of all of those things, it probably needs a little bit of thinking. I think I was fortunate to always be in, you know, kind of, well, in one, you know, absolute massive money printing kind of business, and one with thinner margins like here, but still profitable and kind of successful, established over many years. So yeah, it's kind of, there might be situations where that's not quite applicable, but yeah, that's the... Cool.
What you can easily do, basically enable internal mobility, right? So if you promote people moving teams and learning new stuff, that's kind of one of the ways I can build a generalist. So you not necessarily need to hire them, you can build them.
Right. The business. No, that adds more of that's more really technical skill. You understand business.
With this, maybe we move on and go and socialize and chat, and please keep all these conversations going face to face. Thank you.